Hi, this is Paul. I wanted to make a broader video on the Jordan Peterson Kavanaugh tweet, but I wanted to wait until after I had my Sacramento meetup because I often find a lot of wisdom in that group and learn a lot of things and get some other perspectives. And this morning, I had a number of people on Facebook, and some people sent me emails and said, you should really talk about this in terms of the politics and religion. Politics and religion, tough things to talk about, but let's talk about some things. So yeah, the Kavanaugh tweet has really kind of roiled the Jordan Peterson following and caused a lot of turmoil. Now, in my opinion, there are two takes on this. I had one, and then I went to the meetup and got, basically a number of people said, think about it this way. So here are the two main takes that I see at this point. Number one, Jordan Peterson is undisciplined and impulsive, also expressive and transparent. Those are kind of the opposite sides of those two things, especially when it comes to Twitter. This is Jordan Peterson being Jordan Peterson. That was pretty much my take when I came to the meetup and put that one forward. And then really the other one was pushed pretty hard back at me. This is a calculated move to recalibrate his persona on the American political spectrum to make him more mainstream for major media. And let's run through these two takes. First, the Jordan Peterson will be Jordan Peterson. This guy wears his heart on his sleeve. This is why we love him. This is part of what makes him not just smart, but fun. And when we watch those crazy, rambling biblical videos or his evangelistic roadshow that he's on right now, this is who he is. He gets on stage and he rambles. It's stream of consciousness. He does what gets immediate response from the audience. If the audience is quiet, he continues to follow that through when he talks about how he does counseling. He doesn't sit there and calculate what he's going to say. He basically speaks off the cuff and speaks from his heart, and more often than not, he's right and worth listening to and insightful and fun and engaging and all those things. This is part of what makes him him and part of what we love about him. But another way of seeing this is undisciplined, especially in a political sense. Because it's one thing if you're just sitting having a conversation with someone or even just, kind of spitballing with friends. But when you deal with institutions, discipline becomes important because you're not just speaking for yourself, you're speaking on behalf of a community. And now I remember when Bernie Sanders was taking on Hillary Clinton. I remember Mark Shields on the on Shields and Brooks. That's the NewsHour thing that they do every Friday on PBS NewsHour. I remember Mark Shields commenting about Bernie Sanders. I've never seen such a disciplined politician. And I thought, what does he mean by that? And I thought through that. Well, the meaning was Bernie Sanders sticks to his message. And, how much was the average monetary donation to Bernie Sanders? And bang, 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 bang. Every time Bernie Sanders got on stage, he said the same thing. This is what it means to be a disciplined politician. This is not Jordan Peterson. This is not Jordan Peterson at all. In fact, you can find Jordan Peterson changing his mind about things mid-interview and changing them back another interview very early on in the process. And a few people connected with me who knew him personally because I was making videos, and one of the comments I got was he's very apt at changing himself depending on the audience he's speaking to. Now this might sound to some of you two-faced, but it's also a very powerful rhetorical and relational skill, and where you mirror back at people who they are. And as a pastor, I do this. The Apostle Paul says, to the Jews he's a Jew, to the Greek he's a Greek. This is part of how we connect with each other. But the difficulty of this, especially when you get into an institutional frame, is the community requires you to have a disciplined line. And it's a lot of these tensions actually that are under the surface as we talk about people's complaints about churches. Churches hold a particular line. Well, they do that because of a community. It's not just politicians that do that. Pastors do that. And part of the reason you do that is, if I decide one day to stand up and say, I'm not going to be a Christian today, I'm going to be a Muslim. Well, my congregation would have a problem with this and they would fire me. And this is because not only do I speak to a community, but at times I speak for a community. And this is a reality about institutions and communities. And for the most part, Jordan Peterson has been Jordan Peterson. It's been a one-man show. It's been a one-man band. And the beauty and flexibility of that is you can get up and you can say whatever it is you want to say because it's just you. And so Jordan doesn't stay on script. And people who are surprised by that are like, have you ever watched his videos? There's nothing scripted about him. I've tried to outline some of his talks, and it's nearly impossible because it's a rabbit trail over here and a rabbit trail over there, and I do the same thing. Now, again, if it's just you talking, who cares? But if you are the President of the United States, if you are the leader of a political party, if you are a spokesperson for a cause that a whole group of people have associated with and identified with and staked reputation on and given money to and given time towards, well, suddenly your words matter in a different way. And now, obviously, in the Trump era, this has been, Trump has undercut so much, not only political correctness, but political conventional wisdom but all at the same time, a lot of these things Trump has paid a price for. But this is Jordan Peterson. Now, I often find people not facing a reality about Jordan Peterson too in politics. When it comes to policy, okay? When it comes to policy, Jordan Peterson appears to be a Canadian moderate, which puts him kind of middle left on the American scene. And remember Jordan Peterson on Bill Maher. Now everyone on the show was over to the left, and so then Peterson spoke up. What about all those people that voted for Trump? This is a reconciliation move, but it also was in alignment with the right. So, as we get in a little bit later, part of his rise you can attribute to the anti-left coalition out there. Let's call it a coalition. He's also a pragmatist, which is in tension with his temperamental habit of expressive hyperbole. A number of people commented on Owen Benjamin's lies, and I agree with the comments. When a lot of these things that Owen Benjamin calls lies, I don't see these as lies, they're hyperbole. This is how Peterson talks. He's bombastic, he's dynamic, he's expressive. This is what's fun about him. And so he's going to say, everyone in the world. Now, do you mean everyone in the world? No. It's a hyperbole. And so I haven't slept for a month. People often say those kinds of things to me. And more often than not, they actually were sleeping. They didn't sleep as much as they'd want, but when they say, I haven't slept for a month, I don't take them literally. It's kind of that internet literalism that gets going. Now, Jordan Peterson on Twitter, if you look at, so he posted a blog post, and where he kind of walks through it, and this was in many ways quintessential Peterson, and he talked about the fact, which he's spoken about before, that he has trouble with Twitter, and his son called him out on that and said, Dad, you've really got to clean up your act on Twitter, because before about 6 months ago, Jordan Peterson on Twitter was one-offing, snide comments. His moodiness was apparent. Now, again, if you're you, the moodiness, I'm having a bad day, so I'm going to crab at this person. I'm going to get into this little Twitter spat with this person. A number of months ago, he tried to sort of beg that off, and he had these little rules about Twitter where, he wasn't going to use Twitter for that way. Now, Twitter is a den of temptation for many of our bad impulses when it comes to social media. It's just so easy to type out a snarky tweet, and I've done it, and if anyone else is on Twitter, they've done it. And so in many ways, this blog post was, again, in a lot of ways, Peterson being Peterson. He has a mea culpa in there, and he apologizes, but does he, as some commenters and some Facebook groups that I was reading this morning, now this just makes it worse. So, and this is often the case if you do something that offends someone, And one rhetorical thing is, well, I don't know what that means, which is usually not really the straightforward question. It's, I'm angry, and one of the phrases that we've used for being upset is, I can't understand it. Don't take that phrase literally, because often if you do something wrong and you try to explain, you just dig your hole deeper. And I think for some people, the blog post was reassurance, and for other people, no, he just dug his hole deeper. And this is, again, Peterson on Twitter, and he says, well, I've got almost 1 million followers on Twitter. I don't know if I should give Twitter up. This is the challenge of success. Now you've got something of value. Now you have to weigh the value of having a mouthpiece with 800 some thousand followers versus giving it up, because, well, and this is the bigger challenge that Peterson is now facing. And it's the challenge of the power of the world. If someone offers you $50 million to have your own daytime talk show as the new Dr. Phil, how do you turn that down? How do you turn that audience down? And this is always the question, can you walk away from, as Christians call it, the world? And what we mean by the world is this conglomeration of power and status and attention, and this, in terms of Christianity, there's, in a sense, 3 enemies to the person. There's our sinful human nature, there's principalities and powers, the devil and his minions, and then there's the world. And Peterson right now, because of his rocket up the status hierarchy, the world is a real big question for Peterson. And the higher you go up this hierarchy, the higher the stakes, the higher the corruption, the higher your ability to be bought, the greater the crowd of naysayers. This is how crowds work. Now, politics in the IDW is an interesting thing too, because this thing was cobbled together fast and loose, basically by a little bit of branding by Eric Weinstein, who's, he was undoubtedly a brilliant guy, but this weird coalition, what is it really about? We're an alternate meaning. We're creating alternate meaning. Okay, and we're about nuance. That's in some sense what Eric has been tweeting about with respect to this thing. But when it comes to meaning and nuance, well, yeah, they are compatible, but here's part of the reality. There's a lot of both ands in life. You always live with nuance, but you always need to know what you believe. And both have to go all the way down. Both have to scale all the way up. And so it's what you get at is you need both a solid core where you have solid beliefs on things that you don't nuance, and you also have to be able to use nuance with the world. Okay? And that's why nuance and groundedness actually go together properly and can manifest themselves in tolerance and generosity. But at the same time, there are points where you stand and you don't nuance and you don't equivocate. And figuring out how to manage those two dynamics in the course of a life, and this gets harder when it comes to institutions, is tremendously, tremendously difficult. Now, when Eric Weinstein was on Rubin all by himself, I should really re-watch it and look for this clip, because when he said it, it grabbed me and I've never forgotten it. Because basically what he said to Dave Rubin, because this is the dynamic of our moment, Eric Weinstein basically says, well, you need to know at a very deep level that things will be okay. And I thought, yeah, that's right. What's the basis for knowing at a deep level things will be okay? This is exactly one of the things that religion offers, because what the depths and the foundational nature of religion give its adherents an ability, and again, this is an advantage that religion has over, let's say, materialist naturalism, which is you can say, okay, you can take my life. I can die. This is one of the powers of the resurrection, what energized the early Christian community, so that when the plague hit a town, everyone in their right mind fled to get away from the illness, but Christians stayed and cared for the poor. Why? Because Christians said, I'm going to be raised with my Lord, and I will reign in a new heavens and a new earth. And so I can spend my life in caring for the sick and the needy, and I can give my life for a cause because it transcends me. That's the kind of security that religion offers or can offer. And so when I heard Weinstein say this, who goes to synagogue because there might be some good pragmatic things for it, but distances himself from being a believer, I think, okay, Eric, what's your deep level? Is it and then he and Joe Rogan will talk about FU money. Is it the FU money that you have? Is it the fact that you have status and power and wealth to the degree that, if Peter Thiel gets ticked off at you or upset by something that you said and he fires you, you've got enough money that you'll be okay? Is that where your security lies? What about the rest of us who don't have FU money? What do we got? Well, many of them have security based on other things than FU money. And so you have to ask the question, what is the basis of your faith? And so the IDWs always, if you have Ben Shapiro on there, and then you have the Weinstein brothers and Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson, and we're all getting along, blah 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 blah. But this is the thing about a loose configuration, always has rough edges. And who is Jordan Peterson? This is my take on him. He's episodic. The biblical and I'm the same way. I mean, I think part of the reason I think I can understand Jordan Peterson is I see quite frankly, a lot of the flaws that I see in myself, he's got some of them. And I'm not trying to compare I'm nowhere near as smart as he is. And, I'm not trying to play that game. All I'm saying is he's episodic. He starts things and he doesn't finish them. The biblical series, this was the big thing. Well, now he's kind of doing his traveling roadshow evangelistic crusade. That's cool. That's who he is. He's episodic. And again, when you're an individual, when it's just something you're doing, if you're making it up as you go along, that's really cool. Well, the higher status you go, the more risk there is, the more, especially if you don't have an institution that, if the leader of the NRA comes out one day and says, I think there needs to be more gun legislation. Boom. He might even think this himself, but he can't say it because he's there within an institution. So he's episodic. And again, someone who knows him personally, people I've talked to who know him personally, one of the questions I ask them about him is, do you think he has a plan? And the answer I always get is no. He's not a planner. I take one thing after the next. And I think for the most part, everything we've seen about him, this is who he's been. It's one thing after the next, and he's not quite sure what he's going to do. And he was going to restart the biblical series in November of 2018, and now he's going to restart it in November of 2019. And this is who he is. And I'm not saying it's good and bad. It's just the way it is. Speak the truth. Do what is meaningful. Don't manage outcomes, and opportunities will arise and take them. This is his advice he gives. This is exactly what he's doing. He's following a personal path, not building a coalition or an institution. Now, this is option 2, that this is calculated. And I don't think these things are necessarily contradictory or exclusive, because the more I think about this, the more I think, well, first of all, almost all of us are double-minded in one way or another. Today we're going to be disciplined and we're going to do everything we're supposed to, and we're going to hold to the diet, and we're only going to eat beef, or we're only going to eat vegetables, or I'm not going to eat that ice cream sandwich that I love to end the day with. and then the next day I do it. This is how we are. We are human beings. We are not transparent to ourselves, the control we have over ourselves. And in some ways, Peterson, one side of him can be tremendously controlled. And then you see, boom, you just see it fly apart. And that's always been my read of him and looking at him. And in some ways, he can be incredibly disciplined. And in other ways, I would imagine the discipline just falls apart. And I often have the sense of watching him that there's a fragility about him. He's fragile in some ways, and that's part of the way that he's so forceful. He has to be forceful because he's fragile. And you hear this with his issues about health, his issues with his struggle with depression. And I'm not saying anything bad about him. We're all fragile. We're human beings, for peace sake. This is how we are. But again, Peterson wears this on his sleeve. He's transparent about it. He talks about his family life. He talks about his kids. He talks about his relationship with his wife. I mean, this is just who the guy is, and part of what makes him the Truman Show in some ways for us. So these two options aren't necessarily contradictory. But I think the way to follow this is follow the major media breadcrumbs in this, okay? Those of us who are watching him on YouTube and becoming Jordan Peterson nerds and, watching every last thing he does out there, bear in mind, we're a tiny little nerdy community nerding out on this stuff. The vast majority of normal people, well, what is the Jordan Peterson they see? And it's at this level that the handlers have access and define the narrative. Because remember, this was first just YouTube is GarageWorks, and it used to be just the Jordan Peterson show. And he's feeling grumbly about C16, and his wife is out of town, and he usually gets up and he writes. But he's been playing with YouTube, so he gets on YouTube and he says, he has this screed about enforced speech. And then, he goes to school and there's a protest, and the protest about him, and the woman comes up with the video camera and says, "How do you feel that there are Nazis at your rally?" And he says, "I don't like Nazis." And he talks to her off the cuff, and someone in one of my comment section, I miss the Jordan Peterson with boots and back when Jordan was just a nobody like the rest of us. And on one hand, we vicariously cheer his rise up the hierarchy, and we want more and more people to hear about him, and he's bringing our message to the world, and it's the glorious romantic revolution until it arrives. And suddenly he has handlers, and suddenly so there's a class, there's an elitist, there's a populist, there's another strain in this thing. And now he has handlers. And here's the thing, Jordan Peterson will go on his Patreon page and do his Q&A with his YouTubers and all of this kind of stuff. But most of the normals will never, ever see that. They are going to be watching major media. And so if you don't look at Jordan Peterson beneath the major media line, what would you see? Well, Jordan Peterson can thank the anti-left coalition for his rise. Few things, C16, and then nobody helped his career more in some ways than Cathy Newman. Well, that's not true. His performance on Cathy Newman. But, this video was a transformative moment in his rise, and it put him on the radar screen. He became a regular on Fox News. In fact, he was on Fox News fairly frequently, and now that plays into people's, so if you're kind of on the left and you're a Jordan Peterson fan, you're like, oh, he's on Fox News again. Oh, it's, how am I gonna, what's he gonna do to my reputation when he goes on Fox News with all my friends on the left? All right, and so it's like, oh, does he have to go on Fox News again? Oh, does he, And then, but if you're on the right, you're like, he's our champion. He's on Fox News. He's arrived. He's on Fox and Friends. This is wonderful. Jordan Peterson is our hero, and he's tearing down bloody postmodern neo-Marxism, and he's challenging political correctness, and he's doing all this, and this is, again, look at the major media news and above. And then this video came out of built not bought, and he's commenting on this what this is. Now, again, if you understand politics, you know that the Democratic Party is an umbrella organization and there are sub-factions within it, and they're all vying for power for the message. And in the next in the 2020 campaign, the Democrats are going to look like the Republicans because they tried the Republican method of coronating their champion, who was Hillary, and how that turned out. And so you're going to have a million Democratic flowers blooming, all vying for supremacy in the party. And so the Democratic primary for the 2020 American election is going to be a fight for the soul of the Democratic Party. And, well, one of Jordan, I didn't put this together right away until actually the Pageau interview, but why is he critiquing this video? I thought, this is what's this doing on his channel? And again, part of me, in terms of option one, thought, this is Peterson being Peterson. He takes, it, and then I thought, oh, that's right, his friend put this together. This is his friend, Gregg Hurwitz. And all right, so this is just Jordan Peterson with his YouTube Garage Works, and this is his friend. And Peterson does this. Peterson, like I do, uses his YouTube channel to talk who he's interested in, what he's interested about. Put your friends on, let anybody else. There's the airplane. I got the airplane and the mockingbird. Do whatever you want to with it. Great. That's a YouTube channel. It's what it's for. But then when Pageau talked to Hurwitz, I thought, now how did this come? Now again, for Jonathan, Hurwitz writes comics, and he's an author, and he, this is something very much in line with what Jonathan is doing. But from Hurwitz's side of it, what's this about? Well, and again, I'm not speaking ill of him, because go for it. This is what you do if you're trying to move an agenda forward. You get on Medium, and if you can get on Jordan Peterson's big channel and Jordan Peterson's friend Jonathan, his channel, well, and for me, I personally am exactly the audience that Hurwitz is trying to persuade, because many of the values that Hurwitz espouses in this this old Democratic Party is where I came from politically. So I'm exactly the audience. And so now, it's working on me. I'd far rather see the Democratic Party that Hurwitz is promoting win the day for the Democrats, instead of a lot of what we've been seeing. And then Owen Benjamin mentions on his back patio screed the handlers, and I thought, okay, this is taking shape. And then you'll remember the hit job that had been done on Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson, New York Times, custodian of the patriarchy. And this, for someone like me who has, my world is incredibly politically diverse, if you haven't been able to figure that out. My own political history lies with the African American vote. That's where I grew up. I've almost always, if you look at my voting record, I've voted like a black man my whole life, and I don't apologize for that. These are the people I grew up with. These were my tribe. This is how I voted. But I also grew up in the Christian Reformed Church, which is probably 75-80% Republican, at least in the United States. It's a deeply conservative religious tradition. And my little Stan and Barb Vanderklay in Paterson, we voted for Democrats with all the black folks in Paterson. All of my cousins and relatives and grandparents always voted for Republicans. So I got family on both sides of this thing. I'm not going to cut people out of my life because of politics. My own little local congregation has people who are part of the Democratic Party, work for the Democratic Party, have run on Democratic platforms, and also people who are dyed-in-the-wool Republicans who would never vote for a Democrat. And we're all in one church together, and we're brothers and sisters in Christ, and we all live together across the political divide. And in fact, anybody who knows the black community at more than a facile surface level knows that, you know, the black community is socially really quite conservative. And when Proposition 8, which was the gay marriage back in 2008, a lot of people blamed black women for, you know, the defeat of gay marriage in California in 2008. The black community is a fairly conservative community. They've just never voted for the Republicans because of a particular political history. So, you know, politics is like that. And politics is an aspect of our lives. And so all of us are going to have political ideas. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later in this. So let's not kill each other over politics. Let's not divorce each other over politics. Let's not alienate over politics. Let's relativize politics to a place that it should be. Okay? And then the Dr. Oz show, which many people have said this was one of Peterson's best interviews. If you, instead of listening to dozens of hours of YouTube videos of Jordan Peterson, if you wanted to kind of get the whole Jordan Peterson enchilada, refined, well-spoken, you know, sharpened, articulated, calibrated for a popular audience, he hit it out of the park on this interview. He was, you know, it was terrific. This is Peterson. He was sharp. He was articulate. He was nuanced. He wasn't facing Kathy Newman in this, but Dr. Oz, obviously a sympathetic host, someone who knew his positions, someone who was interested in giving Jordan Peterson a fair hearing. And that's when Adam of Think Club said, you know, this is a tryout for his new show, and it was like, oh no, take me back to the Garage Works, take me back to the Garage-Band days, Jordan. Let's do our biblical series, and let's. It's not what happens. It's not what happens in the world. What in this moment is the quickest way to remake Jordan Peterson's political image in the United States? You ride a wave. This is what Peterson has been doing all along. He rode the anti-left wave up. This Kavanaugh hearing, this was a defining moment. We'll see 5-10 years from now if it will be, because it seems like every month we have a new defining moment. But, you know, Kavanaugh was a huge deal. And it was so polarized and so divisive and so painful. And the reason is because you've got Me Too and you've got the anti-left. And this is just one of these moments where everything kind of comes into alignment and bang! You're going to let this wave go by? If you need to do a big job, you need the kind of power and mass and momentum that a really huge wave can offer. You need something this big to undo the hit job that was done to Jordan Peterson over the last year and a half by the left. And Peterson can keep doing his evangelistic show, because that's the Garage-Band Peterson versus the major media Peterson. But if you're his major media handler and you don't see this Kavanaugh thing as an opportunity to rebrand your client for popular consumption in the United States, to say, okay, Jordan, no more Fox News. We want you on ABC. We want you on NBC. We want you on CNN. We want you in the mainstream. All right? Probably not MSNBC. So actually, I made a video earlier this week that I didn't post. And I didn't post it again because I wanted to hear from the meetup and I wanted to hear what people thought. First thing I thought when I saw that tweet, especially with my take on Peterson, the Garage-Band, off-the-cuff, hard-on-your-sleeve Peterson, is James 3. Not many of you should become teachers, my fellow believers, because you know that we who teach will be judged more strictly. Yeah, I think about this. We all stumble in many ways, all of us. Anyone who is never at fault in what they say is perfect, able to keep their whole body in check. And the force of that is, that's none of us. When we put bits in the mouth of horses to make them obey us, we can turn the whole animal. Or take ships as an example. Although they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are steered by a very small rudder wherever the pilot wants to go. Likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. The tongue is also a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole body, sets the whole course of one's life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell. Now, there's an archetypal statement for you. All kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, and sea creatures are being tamed and have been tamed by mankind, but no human being can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil full of deadly poison. And that's what makes Twitter so dangerous. Your friend group matters a lot. And we are always influenced by our friends. And we are social creatures. And elephants are herd animals. And we believe in groups. And so over time, the people you hang out with will be the people that influence you and make you. We are built up from below. Read Neil Postman's Amusing Ourselves to Death. Again, this is what got me on the whole Jordan Peterson YouTube thing. This is what launched my channel in many ways. Information technology always changes information. Plato was pondering, what will writing do to politics? The Telegraph and newspaper, Postman writes articulately about those. They changed American politics. It used to be that an American president could walk down the street in a place other than his hometown and nobody would know who he was. Now, look at the way media is reshaping the world. And Postman's big point was that you probably can't do education with television because of the medium. You can't do things with Twitter because of the medium. And now social media, I mean, what Postman saw in infancy, we are now feeling en masse. And we don't know how far or how deep this will go. Democracy isn't the same as it was in face-to-face Athens. I was watching a little bit of Owen Benjamin again. He was making the point, yeah, Athens was a democracy and most of the people were slaves. Same with Rome. Slaves couldn't vote. Slaves were non-people. They were property. So, America plus social media is different and we don't know how. To be consequential is to be controversial. How did Socrates die and why? And look at the Christian story. Jesus, according to Christians, Jesus is the Son of God. He's the perfect man. But I'll tell you, in many ways, Jesus is way more popular now than he was then. And the reason is because we mold Jesus. And, Jesus was kind. Well, there's a reason that all political sides wanted Jesus dead, because in the great first century culture war, those who sided with Empire and Rome and the Herodians and the factions that wanted them out, who were all divided, all of those factions couldn't agree on hardly anything, but they could agree that the world would be better without Jesus. And today, when you look at the kind of reputation that Jesus has. Jesus was a wise man. Jesus was a nice teacher. Jesus was kind. Jesus was tolerant. Yes, he was all those things. And he also was, he would also tell people things that they did not want to hear. And for a while in the Galilee, huge mobs, huge crowds were following him. And you know what? Most of them left him. And even Jesus' inner core, they left him. Why? Because he looked at him and said, you're all about the bread and circuses. You follow me because I feed you. You follow me because I heal you. But you don't understand why I'm feeding you and why I'm healing you. And when it comes right down to it, you want me to be a kind of Messiah that I am not okay with. And so I will not be that Messiah for you. And the mobs left him. Read John 6. And Jesus says something crazy like, unless you eat my body and drink my blood, you can have no part of me. And everyone's like, Cannibalism? This guy's a nut. And as this turns to his disciples, and are you going to leave me? And they're like, well, who else do we have? But then on the way back down to Jerusalem, they follow him, and Peter wants to be his handler, and he says, don't go to Jerusalem. That's a bad move. And Jesus says, I'm going to go down there. I'm going to be turned over into the hands of Gentiles. I'm going to be killed. And Peter says, never. I'll never let that happen. And Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. And then Peter says, I'll never leave you. And he denies him 3 times. And they all leave him. And the only ones at the cross are women and probably young John, who's too young and too small for those who are killing Jesus to imagine that this is a threat that they need to be concerned of. All the older male apostles are hiding. They abandon him in his hour of need, and Peter denies him. This is how we are. And again, we shouldn't listen to this story, just like Peterson says about Auschwitz. We shouldn't listen to this story and say, well, I wouldn't do what Peter did. No, we should listen to the story and say, I do exactly what Peter does. I'm a coward. I do what is expedient, not what is more than meaningful, what is right. This is how we are. In a secular world, your politics becomes your religion. Heaven and hell both get pulled into this frame. And if you don't have a bigger narrative to live within, then politics will be your narrative. But let me tell you something about politics. It is not shaky ground to stand on. It changes all the time. And again, when you get back to Eric Weinstein's argument, you need something deeper that says it'll be okay for you to actually moderate and modulate politics, to not let politics become your life. Politics comes and goes. Your life comes and goes. You want to stand on something more firm. Weinstein was right about a security-based everything will be okay. But what if you don't have FU money? Like the poor, we will always have politics with us, and sometimes we need to act. And see, this is where, again, my Christian tradition comes into being, because there are some Christians, lately especially, some Christians over on the left have made politics their religion, and if you go to certain kinds of churches, both on the left and the right, all you'll hear about is politics. In my mind, that's a betrayal of the gospel. Because if you look at Jesus, he alienated all sides in his culture war during his day. Because the one side said, you have to be against the Romans. And Jesus says, no, I'm not going to be against the Romans. And the other side said, well, you have to be, it's the Romans that killed him. And, well, they killed him in their corruption. Not Peter, but Pilate was being a coward. He was doing what was expedient, and that's why he killed Jesus. You need something deeper than politics. But at the same time, you have to deal with politics. And there are moments and times to make a stand. And so some political traditions say we're going to stay out of politics completely. I don't think that's right. As Peterson rightly says, we have our ideas, we have our minds, but what this world calls us to do sometimes is act. Sometimes we get it right, sometimes we get it wrong. I think about Bonhoeffer and his participation in the plot to kill Hitler. Was Bonhoeffer right? Other Germans were, Boltmann was, Christians should stay out of politics. And right now in the church, it's like, the left is like, well, we have to take down Donald Trump, and the right is like, we have to support Donald Trump. And in many ways, both sides have lost credibility on the religious frame because of it. Now, if you're going to be a Christian in America, you should probably be involved in politics. But it should be relativized, because politics is not your life. And the Democratic Party cannot be your life, and the Republican Party cannot be your life, and you're going to have your vote. You might vote one way, you might vote another way, you might be right, you might be wrong, you're going to have your ideas, there'll be moments to take a stand. And so what life calls us to do sometimes is to speak and to act according to what we think we should do. But if in fact you have a secure foundation, if in fact your life itself is relativized, because this is not the only life you're having, I think that actually, and I'm going to get into this probably in my sermon today to a degree, and I'll be posting it Friday, but it's not written yet. But the point is, how can Christians on one hand not make politics their life and be the best kind of citizens? That was Augustine's challenge in the City of God to figure out. That was Daniel's challenge when he's taken as a slave to Babylon and basically now they're attempted to be brainwashed to become Nebuchadnezzar's boy. Christians have to negotiate this. And the way you negotiate this is by not letting it become ultimate. You need to have your core values. You need to be able to do nuance. But politics can't be your life. Jesus was killed unjustly as a political act. Crucifixion was for political criminals as an example. He was framed by his people and executed by their enemies. Christians will probably never have the option to be apolitical. Christians are going to be on different sides of political conversations. Christians ought to be able to have those conversations both with conviction and with nuance, partly because their Christianity relativizes the politics of the moment. Christians finally are judged by an audience of one. And as I've mentioned a number of times, the New Testament keeps saying, we are judged according to what we do. Politics is a sphere in which we have to act. And I can point to amazing Christians on both sides of the political aisle who have radically different political views. And I'm okay with that, because we're human beings, and we have to act in politics, and we will get things wrong. Back to what this video is about. Well, what is this video about? What's the reality of Jordan Peterson and his tweet? Is he undisciplined and impulsive, also expressive and transparent, especially on Twitter? Yep. Is this a calculated move calibrated to redeem his persona from the political left for mainstream consumption? I don't have knowledge of that. This is reading between the lines. This is looking at patterns. That could be too. But the person who wrote me and said, you need to do a video on politics. Well, I've also laid out for you my view on politics, that I think as a Christian, Christians ought to both be the best citizens of the empire, but also with a capacity to critique and to find the way to be in their citizenship also bearing witness to their citizenship of another kingdom. So there are my thoughts.